The metallic clink of handcuffs echoed through the marble halls of the municipal courthouse as Officer Sandra Mills lunged forward, her face twisted with rage. The target of her sudden assault stood perfectly still, shoulders squared in military precision, dark eyes calculating every movement. Lieutenant Brianna Washington, decorated Navy SEAL and combat veteran, watched the approaching threat with the same calm intensity she had used to assess enemy positions in hostile territories across 3 continents. The morning had started like any other Tuesday in Riverside County. Brianna had awakened at 500 hours, as she had every day for the past 15 years since enlisting. Her modest 2-bedroom home in the Oakwood Heights subdivision reflected her disciplined lifestyle: minimalist furniture, polished surfaces, and a single framed photograph of her SEAL team on the mantelpiece. The American flag, folded with military precision, sat in a glass case beneath it, a reminder of fallen brothers who would never see another sunrise. She had received the court summons 3 weeks earlier, a crisp white envelope that arrived on a Thursday morning along with bills and advertisements. The neighborhood dispute had been brewing for months, a seemingly trivial matter involving property lines and homeowner association regulations that had somehow escalated into legal proceedings. Mrs. Henderson, her elderly neighbor, had planted roses that allegedly encroached 2 inches onto HOA common ground. The association had demanded removal. Brianna had witnessed the original planting and agreed to testify about the property boundaries. Simple enough, she had murmured to herself while reviewing the court documents. Military life had taught her the importance of precision in testimony. Truth was truth, regardless of the consequences. The courthouse buzzed with morning activity as Brianna arrived at 08:30 hours sharp. Her dress blue uniform bore the weight of numerous decorations: the Navy Cross, Silver Star, Bronze Star with V device, Purple Heart, and Combat Action Ribbon, among others. Each medal represented moments of terror and triumph, decisions made in split seconds that had saved lives or eliminated threats. The fabric pressed against her shoulders carried the invisible burden of classified operations, of missions that would never appear in any public record. Judge Patricia Coleman's courtroom occupied the 3rd floor, its dark wood paneling and high ceilings designed to inspire respect for the law. Brianna had arrived 30 minutes early, a habit ingrained through years of military briefings where punctuality meant the difference between success and failure. She took a seat in the gallery, observing the layout with tactical awareness: exits, sight lines, potential cover positions. Old habits died hard. The first sign of trouble appeared when Officer Sandra Mills entered the courtroom. Brianna recognized the type: immediately aggressive posture, constantly scanning for perceived threats, the particular combination of authority and insecurity that created dangerous confrontations. Mills wore the uniform of the Riverside County HOA Police, a relatively new position created to enforce subdivision regulations with quasi-legal authority. Her hand rested on her service weapon, fingers twitching with nervous energy. Mills surveyed the courtroom with predatory intensity, her gaze lingering on each face as if cataloging potential criminals. When her eyes found Brianna, something shifted. The officer's expression hardened, jaw clenching with visible tension. She approached the witness gallery with deliberate steps, each footfall echoing against the polished floors. "You don't belong here," Mills said, her voice carrying the particular blend of authority and contempt that Brianna had encountered in various forms throughout her military career. "This is a private HOA matter. Residents only." Brianna maintained eye contact, her voice steady and professional. "I'm Lieutenant Washington, United States Navy. I've been summoned to provide testimony regarding the Henderson property dispute." Mills stepped closer, invading personal space in a classic intimidation tactic. "I don't care what costume you're wearing. You people always try to play dress up to avoid consequences. Show me proof you live in Oakwood Heights." The phrase "you people" hung in the air like an explosive charge waiting to detonate. Brianna had heard it countless times before, in different contexts and from different mouths. But the underlying message remained consistent. She reached into her uniform pocket, withdrawing her military identification and residential documentation with practiced efficiency. "Here's my identification and proof of residence," she said, extending the documents. "I live at 247 Maple Street, directly adjacent to the disputed property line." Mills barely glanced at the paperwork before shoving it back. "Fake documents. Anyone can print these up nowadays. You're trespassing in a government building, and I'm placing you under arrest for criminal trespass and obstruction of justice." The escalation happened with shocking swiftness. Mills reached for her handcuffs, lunging forward with the clear intent to forcibly restrain Brianna. In that split second, muscle memory took over. Years of close-quarters combat training, hand-to-hand combat drills, and defensive tactics activated like a precisely calibrated machine. Brianna sidestepped the initial assault, her left hand intercepting Mills' wrist, while her right hand controlled the officer's elbow. The movement was fluid, economical, designed to neutralize the threat without causing unnecessary harm. Mills stumbled forward, her momentum carrying her past Brianna's position. "Stand down, officer," Brianna commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to life-or-death leadership situations. "I am not resisting arrest, but I will defend myself against unlawful assault." Mills recovered quickly, face flushed with embarrassment and rage. "You just assaulted a police officer. I'll add that to your charges, along with impersonating military personnel." She reached for her radio, calling for backup while keeping her other hand near her weapon. "Dispatch. This is Unit 47. I need immediate backup at the courthouse. I have a suspect impersonating military personnel who just assaulted an officer. She's dangerous and potentially armed." The courtroom had erupted into chaos. Spectators pressed toward the exits, while court personnel attempted to restore order. The bailiff, a veteran law enforcement officer named Martinez, approached cautiously with his hand raised in a peaceful gesture. "Everyone needs to calm down right now," Martinez announced. "Ma'am, please remain where you are." "Officer Mills, step back and explain the situation." Mills pointed an accusatory finger at Brianna. "This woman is impersonating a military officer and trespassing in our courthouse. When I attempted to arrest her, she used military-style combat techniques to assault me. She's clearly trained in violence and represents a threat to public safety." "That's an interesting interpretation of events," Brianna replied calmly. "I identified myself properly, provided valid documentation, and defended myself against an unprovoked assault. I never claimed to be someone I'm not, and I have every right to be present in this courtroom as a summoned witness." The courthouse doors burst open as additional officers responded to Mills's backup call. 3 more HOA police officers entered, along with 2 county sheriff's deputies who had been conducting business elsewhere in the building. The tension escalated immediately as multiple armed officers tried to assess the situation while conflicting accounts filled the air. "Everyone freeze right there," shouted Officer Reynolds, Mills's partner and closest ally in the HOA police force. "We have a dangerous individual who assaulted Officer Mills and may be impersonating military personnel." Sheriff's Deputy Tom Carter, a 20-year veteran with multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, studied Brianna's uniform with professional interest. His trained eye recognized authentic military decorations, proper placement of ribbons, and the subtle details that separated genuine service members from imposters. "Hold on a minute," Carter interjected, raising his hand to stop the advancing officers. "Ma'am, what's your name and unit?" "Lieutenant Brianna Washington, Naval Special Warfare Command, SEAL Team 3, currently assigned to Special Operations Training and Evaluation." Carter's expression shifted to one of respect and recognition. Navy Cross recipient, I read about your actions in Syria. That was some serious heroic work you did over there. Mills interjected angrily. Don't fall for her lies. Anyone can memorize military terms and wear a costume. She's a criminal who just assaulted a police officer. The confrontation might have continued escalating, if not for the sudden entrance of Judge Coleman herself. The distinguished African-American woman in her 60s had been presiding over Riverside County courts for over 2 decades, earning a reputation for fairness, intelligence, and an absolute intolerance for misconduct in her courtroom. "What in the hell is happening in my courtroom?" Judge Coleman demanded, her voice cutting through the chaos like a sword. I could hear shouting from my chambers. "Someone better explain this situation immediately." Mills stepped forward, attempting to control the narrative. "Your Honor, I discovered this individual trespassing in your courtroom and impersonating a military officer. When I attempted to arrest her for criminal trespass, she assaulted me using what appeared to be military combat techniques. I believe she represents a serious threat to courthouse security." Judge Coleman's gaze moved to Brianna, taking in the uniform, decorations, and composed bearing. Something flickered in her expression, a moment of recognition that she quickly suppressed. "And you are?" "Lieutenant Brianna Washington, United States Navy. I'm here to provide testimony in the Henderson property dispute case. I was properly summoned and arrived early to ensure punctuality. When Officer Mills demanded proof of residence, I provided valid documentation. She dismissed it as fraudulent and attempted to arrest me without cause. I defended myself using appropriate defensive measures." The judge examined Brianna's documents personally, her experienced eye noting the authentic watermarks, proper formatting, and official seals that indicated genuine military identification. She also recognized something else. The name and face matched a photograph she had seen in a military publication honoring recipients of the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism in combat. "Officer Mills," Judge Coleman said slowly, "these documents appear completely legitimate. What specific evidence led you to believe they were fraudulent?" Mills stammered, her confident demeanor beginning to crack. "Well, Your Honor, people like her are always trying to scam the system. They know if they dress up like military, people will give them special treatment. I've seen it 100 times. People like her." The judge's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Please clarify exactly what you mean by that statement." The courtroom fell silent as Mills realized she had stepped onto dangerous ground. "I mean, people who don't belong in our neighborhood. Troublemakers who try to cause problems for law-abiding residents." Deputy Carter spoke up, his voice firm. "Your Honor, I can confirm that Lieutenant Washington is legitimate military. Her decorations and identification are authentic. I'm familiar with her service record through military publications. She's a genuine American hero." Judge Coleman nodded slowly, pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place. "Officer Mills, how long have you been employed by the HOA police force?" 6 months, Your Honor. I transferred from mall security to serve the community in a more meaningful capacity." "I see. And during those 6 months, how many arrests have you made?" Mills straightened, pride evident in her voice. 47 arrests, Your Honor. I've been very effective at cleaning up the neighborhood and removing undesirable elements." 47 arrests in 6 months. The judge repeated thoughtfully. "That's quite remarkable for a residential area known for its low crime rate. What types of crimes were these individuals committing?" "Various violations, Your Honor: trespassing, loitering, suspicious behavior, failure to comply with HOA regulations, resisting arrest when they wouldn't cooperate with lawful orders." Judge Coleman's expression grew increasingly stern. "And what was the demographic breakdown of these 47 arrests?" Mills hesitated, realizing the trap she had walked into. "I don't keep track of things like that. Your Honor, I arrest criminals, regardless of their background. Bailiff Martinez, please contact the district attorney's office and request a complete breakdown of Officer Mills's arrest records, including demographic information and case dispositions. I want that information within the hour. The judge's attention returned to Brianna. Lieutenant Washington, I want you to know that I remember reading about your service in Navy Times. The article described your actions in Syria, where you led a rescue mission that saved 17 hostages, including 3 American journalists. You were wounded twice during that operation, but continued fighting until every civilian was safely evacuated. Mills's face went pale as she realized the magnitude of her mistake. She had not only assaulted a genuine military hero, but had done so in front of witnesses and a judge who was clearly familiar with Brianna's distinguished service record. Furthermore, Judge Coleman continued, I want to make something absolutely clear to everyone present. This courthouse is a place where justice is served equally to all citizens, regardless of race, background, or any other characteristic. Any officer who cannot uphold that principle has no business wearing a badge in my jurisdiction. The doors opened again as additional witnesses arrived for the original Henderson property case. Mrs. Henderson herself entered, followed by several neighbors who had observed the property line dispute. Among them was Marcus Thompson, a civil rights attorney who lived in the Oakwood Heights subdivision and had been following the pattern of aggressive enforcement in their neighborhood. Your Honor, Thompson announced, I'm here as both a neighborhood resident and as an attorney representing several families who have been subjected to harassment by HOA police. I believe what happened here today is part of a much larger pattern of discriminatory enforcement. Judge Coleman gestured for him to continue. Please explain. Mr. Thompson. Over the past 6 months, Officer Mills has targeted minority residents with aggressive enforcement actions for minor violations that are routinely ignored when committed by white residents. She has arrested children for playing basketball in their own driveways, cited families for cooking outdoors during cultural celebrations, and repeatedly questioned the right of minority residents to be in their own neighborhood. Mills interrupted angrily. That's completely false. I enforce the law equally for everyone. These people are just playing the race card because they got caught breaking the rules. Officer Mills, Judge Coleman said sharply, you will not interrupt counsel when he's speaking in my courtroom. Continue. Mr. Thompson. Thank you, Your Honor. I have documented evidence of disparate enforcement, including video recordings, witness statements, and photographic evidence showing identical violations being handled differently based on the race of the resident. Just last week, Officer Mills arrested a black teenager for skateboarding on the sidewalk while ignoring 3 white teenagers doing the same thing 50 feet away. Brianna listened to these revelations with growing understanding. Her encounter with Mills was not an isolated incident, but part of a systematic pattern of abuse. She thought about her own neighbors, the subtle tensions she had noticed, but attributed to normal community growing pains. Now she realized there had been something much more sinister happening in their subdivision. Your Honor, Brianna spoke up, I'd like to add something to Mr. Thompson's testimony. I've noticed unusual HOA enforcement patterns in our neighborhood. Officer Mills has questioned my presence multiple times while I was working in my own yard, walking to my mailbox, or simply sitting on my front porch. She's asked for identification during these encounters and suggested that I might be more comfortable living elsewhere. That's not true, Mills protested. I was just doing my job, ensuring neighborhood security. Anyone would look suspicious lurking around at all hours. Lurking around at all hours. Brianna's voice remained calm, but carried an edge of steel. You mean maintaining my property, checking my mail, and enjoying my front porch activities that every other resident performs without harassment. Mrs. Henderson, The elderly woman at the center of the original property dispute raised her hand tentatively. Your Honor, may I say something? Of course. Mrs. Henderson. Lieutenant Washington has been a wonderful neighbor. She's helped me with groceries, shoveled my walkway during snowstorms, and always been respectful and kind. When this property dispute started, I asked her to be a witness because I trust her honesty. Officer Mills told me that Lieutenant Washington was probably lying about being military, and that I shouldn't trust people like that to tell the truth in court. The accumulated weight of testimony was building a damning picture of Officer Mills' conduct. Judge Coleman made detailed notes while the evidence mounted, her expression growing increasingly severe. Officer Mills, the judge said, you are facing serious allegations of civil rights violations, assault, and abuse of authority. Do you have anything to say in your defense before I make my ruling on this matter? Mills's composure finally cracked completely. This is all a setup. These people are working together to destroy my career because I've been effective at maintaining order in the neighborhood. They can't stand that someone is finally enforcing the rules that make Oakwood Heights a decent place to live. And what rules would those be? Officer Mills, the rule that black residents must prove their right to exist in their own neighborhood. The rule that military veterans should be assaulted for providing court testimony. The rule that children cannot play in their own yards. I never said anything about race. This has nothing to do with race. I treat everyone exactly the same. Judge Coleman leaned forward, her voice carrying the full weight of judicial authority. Officer Mills, I am immediately suspending your law enforcement authority, pending a full investigation by the State Attorney General's office. You are to surrender your badge, weapon, and all law enforcement equipment immediately. You can't do this. I have rights. I was protecting the community from dangerous individuals. The only dangerous individual I see in this courtroom is someone who abuses the power entrusted to them to terrorize innocent citizens. Bailiff Martinez, please escort Officer Mills from the building and ensure she turns in all department equipment. As Mills was led away, still protesting her innocence and shouting threats about lawsuits and appeals, the courtroom gradually returned to a sense of normalcy. Judge Coleman addressed the remaining assembly with grave solemnity. Ladies and gentlemen, what we witnessed here today represents a fundamental betrayal of the public trust. When we grant individuals the authority to enforce laws, we expect them to do so with fairness, integrity, and respect for the constitutional rights of all citizens. Officer Mills failed in that sacred duty. She turned to Brianna specifically. Lieutenant Washington, on behalf of this court and this community, I want to apologize for the treatment you received today. Your service to this nation deserves our highest respect, and the fact that you were assaulted while attempting to fulfill your civic duty as a witness is absolutely unacceptable. Thank you, Your Honor. I hope this incident leads to positive changes that will protect other residents from similar harassment. I can assure you it will. I'm ordering a comprehensive review of all HOA police activities in this jurisdiction, and I'm recommending that the state legislature examine the legal framework that allows these quasi-police forces to operate with minimal oversight. Mr. Thompson stood up, his legal mind already working on the implications. Your Honor, my clients and I would be happy to cooperate with any investigation. We have extensive documentation of problematic enforcement patterns that we believe will be valuable to investigators. Excellent. I want a full accounting of every arrest, citation, and enforcement action taken by the HOA police force over the past year. If we find evidence of systematic civil rights violations, those responsible will face the full consequences of federal prosecution. Deputy Carter approached Brianna with obvious respect. Ma'am, I just wanted to say it's an honor to meet you. I served 2 tours in Iraq, And I know what kind of courage it takes to do what you did over there. Thank you for your service." "Thank you, Deputy. I appreciate that. And thank you for speaking up when it mattered. Your support helped prevent this situation from escalating further. That's what we're supposed to do: protect and serve all citizens equally." Officer Mills forgot that fundamental principle. As the formal proceedings concluded, and people began to leave the courtroom, several neighbors approached Brianna to express their support and share their own experiences with aggressive HOA enforcement. The conversation revealed a pattern of intimidation that had been affecting the community for months, with many residents afraid to speak up due to fear of retaliation. "I'm glad someone finally stood up to her," said Maria Santos, a mother of 3 who lived 2 blocks from Brianna. "She's been harassing my family since we moved in last year. My kids are afraid to play outside because she keeps threatening to arrest them for noise violations." James Wilson, a retired postal worker, nodded in agreement. "She told me I needed to provide proof of citizenship before I could use the community mailbox. When I complained to the HOA board, they said they would look into it, but nothing ever happened." The stories continued, painting a picture of a community that had been living under a cloud of intimidation and fear. Brianna realized that her military training and experience had given her the confidence to resist Mills's aggression, but many of her neighbors lacked the same resources to defend themselves against abuse of authority. "We need to make sure this never happens again," Brianna told the assembled group. "I'm willing to work with anyone who wants to establish proper oversight and accountability for community law enforcement. No one should have to live in fear in their own neighborhood." Mrs. Henderson, the original reason for the court hearing, took Brianna's hand with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for standing up for all of us. You're a true hero, not just for what you did in the military, but for what you did here today. I just did what anyone should do when they see injustice. We all have a responsibility to protect each other and stand up for what's right." In the weeks that followed, the investigation expanded far beyond Officer Mills's individual actions. The State Attorney General's office uncovered a pattern of discriminatory hiring practices, inadequate training, and lack of oversight that had allowed multiple HOA police departments throughout the state to operate with minimal accountability. Mills herself faced federal civil rights charges and was ultimately sentenced to 18 months in prison for deprivation of rights under color of law. The Oakwood Heights community underwent a transformation as residents who had been living in fear began to organize and advocate for their rights. Brianna found herself elected to the HOA board, where she helped implement new policies, ensuring fair and equal treatment for all residents. The community gardens that had been prohibited under Mill's aggressive enforcement flourished once again. Children played freely in their neighborhoods, and families celebrated cultural traditions without fear of harassment. Judge Coleman's comprehensive review led to state legislation requiring extensive training, oversight, and accountability measures for all private police forces operating in residential communities. The law became known as the Lieutenant Washington Act, recognizing her courage in standing up to abuse of authority and protecting the rights of her neighbors. During the bill signing ceremony at the state capitol, Governor Martinez praised Brianna's actions. Lieutenant Washington demonstrated that true heroism doesn't end when you take off the uniform. Her willingness to stand up for justice in her own community has created positive change that will protect thousands of families across our state. As Brianna stood in the crowd, watching the governor sign legislation that would prevent other communities from experiencing the intimidation and harassment that had plagued Oakwood Heights, she reflected on the unexpected turn her life had taken. She had come to court to provide simple testimony about property lines, and instead found herself at the center of a civil rights case that would have lasting impact. The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence for all service members who had sacrificed for the principles of justice and equality that the new law represented. Brianna thought about her fallen teammates, wondering what they would think about this civilian battle for the same values they had died protecting overseas. Later that evening, back in her quiet home in Oakwood Heights, Brianna sat on her front porch, watching children play basketball in their driveways, families cooking dinner in their backyards, and neighbors chatting over fence lines without fear of harassment or intimidation. The community had found its voice again, and the silence of fear had been replaced by the sounds of life being lived freely. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Deputy Carter. Saw the news coverage of the bill signing. Proud to have served alongside you that day. The community is lucky to have you. Brianna smiled. Typing back, we all served that day. Justice requires all of us to stand up when it matters. As the sun set over Oakwood Heights, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Brianna reflected on the lessons she had learned in that courthouse months earlier. True service to country didn't end with military discharge. It continued every day in the commitment to protect the rights and dignity of fellow citizens. The medals on her dress blue uniform represented moments of valor in foreign lands. But the real victory had been won right here at home, in a courtroom where truth had triumphed over prejudice, and a community had found the courage to demand justice. The American flag that flew in her front yard snapped gently in the evening breeze, a reminder that the principles it represented were not abstract ideals, but living values that required constant vigilance and courage to protect. In standing up to Officer Mills, Brianna had not only defended herself, but had struck a blow for every citizen who deserved to live free from harassment and intimidation in their own community. The story would be retold many times in the years that followed, becoming a reminder that heroism comes in many forms and that the fight for justice is never truly finished. It continues in courtrooms and communities, in the willingness of ordinary citizens to stand up to abuse of power and demand better from those entrusted with authority. Lieutenant Brianna Washington had served her country with distinction overseas, but her greatest victory had been won on the home front, in defense of the principles that make democracy worth fighting for.